What connects Disney's Moana, the French New Wave, and the German television show Captain Blaubeer? The answer? That's tricky. Well, to understand it, let's talk about the Armenian language. Armenian is a confusing language to get started in. It's not the hardest language that exists. Cantonese and Georgian would like to have a word, but it does have its quirks. A unique alphabet, two versions of the letter R, aspirated consonants. It's an interesting tongue to wrestle with. The language seems so daunting because of the relative rarity of it. The alphabet it's written in is only used for that one language. Furthermore, the language is split between two notably different East and West dialects, confusing learners as to where they should start. It's difficult to find books, whether fictional or instructional, written in Armenian. Other than some movies in the state news, there's very little listening material for the language. Armenian is not a major language of trade or commerce outside of Armenia. Armenian as a subject is not taught in a majority of schools. You'd have to go to a specialized institute for it. Even if you did learn it, what practical use would you have for it unless you were planning to live in the Caucasus region? Even the majority of the Armenian diaspora, which far outnumbers the actual population of Armenia, doesn't speak the language. And when they do, it's at home with their own families as a heritage language. But the Armenian language is important. The culture of Armenia, the history and folklore of its peoples, is tied up in the language. Every language has the culture of its speakers tied up in it. But for a language to continue, for its culture to survive, how do you convince people to spend time learning something with a very limited practical use to them? Now, don't get me wrong. Armenian is not in immediate danger of dying out. It's spoken by between 5 to 7 million people, the largest portion living in the country itself. It's the official language of the country, and a widely recognized ethnic minority language elsewhere. Although it may be difficult to grow the number of speakers, there are other languages in a much more dire situation. Whether or not they've been given an official endangered rating, many languages from Hawaiian to Maori to Irish face the constant threat of declining speakers. Even countries that may seem more homogenous to an English speaker, such as Germany, face problems with dialect leveling. Dialect leveling is a process wherein regional differences in a language are gradually removed and replaced by one standard way of speaking. Whether or not you consider them separate languages or dialects, Bavarian, East Franconian, and Upper Saxon have all been steadily replaced by Standard German. First, urbanization leads to dialect leveling in the cities, forcing local tongues into the countryside. Then, as younger generations grow up on increased influence from Standard German and English, the dialects become isolated to the elderly and the language and culture dies with them. This is not to say that the evolution of languages is wrong. I don't advocate that everyone in the UK go back to Old English. But what we see in a country like Germany is not so much an evolution of languages, but a simplification, an imposed uniformity into increased genericness. There are many reasons why this dialect leveling or the endangerment of any language occurs. Jack Saint's video on cultural genocide is a good way to understand what causes a language to die out. What I want to explore is how we can restore languages and cultures. Some countries have already taken an active role in this. For a while, Ireland has made Gaeilge a compulsory subject in school to try and educate a new generation on the language. New Zealand is also implementing a new program to teach its youth Maori. But to actually revive a language, the people you want to learn it need to be enthusiastic about it. They need something to do with a language. I lived in Ireland for 2 years as a child. I went through Irish language classes in school. I learned a little bit, was able to make simple sentences, and then promptly forgot it all as soon as I left Ireland. None of the languages stuck with me. It had never really grabbed me when I was learning it either. Maybe I was too young at the time. Asking a 10-year-old to learn a foreign language, and Irish is a difficult one, can be a daunting task. It was a task I was not up to. I'll be real with you all, I was a poor student in Irish. I cut every corner I could. We were given homework where every day we had to write a new sentence to read to the class. I learned that the word buoy meant to win or defeat, such as in a sports game. So I'd look up the latest Red Sox game and write the sentence, Red Sox buoy Yankees, every single day. Because I had no connection to Irish. Nothing about it grabbed me at that age. Even though RTE would air South Park episodes translated into Irish, I always struggled to find interest in the language. When I moved to Canada, I began to learn French. It was mostly just vocab, extremely simple sentences taught as a byproduct of Canada's bilingualism. After a year, I moved to the UK. I studied French in year 9 and then for my GCSEs, after which I dropped it. I also remember very little of the French I learned, although if I picked it up again, there's probably a decent amount of ingrained memory. But the same problem, the same reason that caused me to forget Irish, is the same reason I dropped French. I never connected to the language. When I was learning French in the UK, the teachers never seemed quite sure how to capture the interest of the students. They'd have us watch an episode of the UK Apprentice where the contestants go to France. Or they'd make us watch that awful education show Extra. That show probably killed a lot of people's passion for the language. It was so bland and uninteresting, and only existed to fill out vocab sheets. The final nail in the coffin for me was the French listening exam. We all sat in a room and a recording played. I was in total panic, because I had no idea what I was hearing, despite over 3 years of learning the language. I picked out the word mange and said, that clip was about eating. Despite the panic, I got really high marks in that exam. Because when I started my GCSE in French, one of the teachers said, if you do all the work and show up to all of the lessons, you'll get a good grade. And they were right. I showed up, did all my homework, and left with an A. But I never learned to understand the language, and any joy I had in it was lost. Years later, after graduating uni, I discovered the films of the French New Wave. I loved them, the way they were done, and the way the language made the dialogue so melodious. Imagine if we were shown these films in French class instead of Extra. Maybe that would have actually captured our attention. Or maybe we were still too young. Maybe as an adult it's easier because you have the habits of good study and work ethic ingrained in you. All I can tell you for sure though, is that the methods my teachers used just didn't work. I began learning German the right way. Right from the start, I was finding media in the language, such as clips from the old Captain Blabber TV show. It was engaging and fun to watch. Whenever I found words I didn't know, I actively wanted to learn them. As well as that, I bought linguaphone tapes in German because I'm a hipster douchebag. As soon as I could afford, I went to Berlin, and while I was there, I bought a translated copy of Mumm und Papa at Sea, which I went through at the start of last March. Learning German never felt too academic for me. It always felt connected to a practical application, the real world. Irish and French never left the classroom. There was always a disconnect. Now, I would never claim to be fluent in German. My speaking has very little practice, but by always focusing on media, my comprehension has skyrocketed. It was this method that I turned to Japanese, to similar results. I haven't been doing Japanese for nearly as long as German, so I'm not very advanced, but by focusing on books in Japanese, as well as listening to YouTubers such as Nakata Daigaku, I'm exposed to the language and the way it's used much more than a sterile classroom setting, and it maintains my passion and energy for the language while I slog through Genki and the Take Him guide. Writing in German has also helped me. My videos in German are still products of a beginner, but in writing them I had to revise complex grammar, declension, slang, dialectal differences between Standard German and Berliner, as well as reference how modern German will often incorporate and Deutschify English words. The past tense of the English reblog in German is usually gereblogt, or something to that effect. It's a loan word, so different people will use it uniquely. But you take English verbs and apply German grammatical structures. All of this practice would never happen if I didn't make the video, especially because the fun of writing and translating a script motivates me through the slog of which case is this, what ending do I add to the adjective, is it plural, is it mask, fem, neuter? It's a similar thing with Japanese. Learning the 4 ways of saying if, the nuances of teoku, and all of that is really complex and hard to make stick if you just tell it to someone. But get them to use it. Write some phrases or a small dialogue, and suddenly you have them on Jisho, excitedly looking up as many nouns and verbs as they can, trying to figure out the intricate details of the sentence they want to write. And that sticks so much more than just reading a line in a textbook. So this brings us back to Armenian. How do we make people enthusiastic about Armenian? I think one way is to create new media in the language, and encourage learners to create their own media using Armenian. In the introduction to the book I'm using as language reference, Eastern Armenian for English Speakers, Astkik Bikhtarian writes, simple exercises as, let's see how your name will look in Armenian, helped substantially. People want to feel personally connected to the language they are learning. They want something to do with it. Remove languages from the sterile classroom environment and get people excited about it. In 2016, Disney released the film Moana, heavily inspired by Polynesian cultures. During an October 2016 press conference in Papeete, the studio announced that the movie, originally in English, would be fully dubbed into Tahitian, making it the first feature film ever to have done so. Later, in 2017, the film was redubbed into the Maori and Hawaiian languages. Unfortunately, only the Maori version is available for purchase. The other two versions weren't given home releases. But imagine you wanted to learn Tahitian, or an endangered language like Hawaiian, and you learned that you could watch Disney movies in that language. Even if you weren't the biggest fan of Disney, that would certainly get you much more excited to try a language than a textbook ever could. Now, I know that a company like Disney is profit motivated and won't do anything that wouldn't visibly increase its margins, but it's an interesting idea to consider. Disney stacks paper to the ceiling and sleeps on 24-inch chrome, so if a producer said, "I need this film dubbed into Armenian, get me the Armenian guy," you know they'd have the resources to do it and get it right. But obviously, we can't expect corporations to do representation or the right thing. We have to do it ourselves. We need to follow our interests, create media and revitalize language and cultures, all of which deserve to be protected and maintained. All we need to do is get over our own language laziness. And that's what connects Disney's Moana, The French New Wave, and Captain Blaubeer. All three of them have made me more excited to learn a language than any lesson I ever took in school.